morning, art historians, wherever you are, or good afternoon from the very hot and sunny West Coast. We just started a little heat wave yesterday. This is John Gunnan speaking, and today I have some very wonderful things to share with you and to prepare you for the coming art history exam. I'm getting excited about that exam. I kind of feel like I'm going to be taking it myself. So I first would like to start with let's see, I have a screen freeze. I'm going to come out of that for a quick sec and go back. Sorry about that. There we go. We're going to start off with a little art detective because I'm getting some feedback. Oh, we like that game. Here's your detail. What work does this come from? Is it jumping into your mind? And there you have it, the Oba plaque. By the way, this plaque is cast brass as opposed to cast bronze. The formula for brass is a little different from the formula for bronze. And I know Alison Napier is going to circle back around to this wonderful piece tomorrow. Okay, here's the next work for Art Detective. Okay, you can see gold, you can see jewels. So hopefully you're starting to get this one. And this is the subject of one of today's comparisons that we will be practicing, the reliquary of Saint Foy or Saint Foy. Okay, this work, by the way, has some inlaid jewels and stones, and I was looking at it last night, wondering what all the jewels and stones were, and I found a list, which is very long and interesting. I'll share with you in just a sec. The page in your curriculum on Romanesque and Saint Foy, it really has a lot. I mean, we talked about that church and how that church was built in the Roman style, and therefore you have that big barrel vault, and it's so heavy. And then we talked about that tympanum on the upper right, how it shows the Last Judgment in 3 registers with Jesus in a mandorla. It's got all this rich iconography about heaven and hell and last judgment. Really a great, amazing piece. And of course, Khan Academy has some wonderful essays on this. So today we're going to be focusing in on what they call the treasure itself, the Saint Foy reliquary. Okay, we're going to do that by way of a comparison questions. So here's that list I told you about, all the different things that could be added on to the Saint Foy reliquary. Now, you know, sometimes when people would die, they'd leave their fortune to the church, or people would give things, they'd contribute things. So this thing was added on to as time went along, which is very interesting. And, you know, it sort of has its own development, and that is an inlay technique. And of course, this also is formed by a technique called repoussé, which means basically hammering, because you know, gold and silver are fairly soft materials that can be pounded into shape, which is nice technique to know about. And it's possible that this head may have been a repurposed head from a Roman statue of a child. Okay, and of course we know that Saint Foy was a child, the real person. Saint Foy means Saint Faith. And so Faith was a little girl, the youngest saint, the youngest person to be martyred by the Romans for not worshiping their gods, the early Christian. And this was probably in the late 200s. It may have been at the time of Diocletian's persecutions of Christians in the later part of the Roman Empire. And also it was in France, which at the time was Gaul, Roman Gaul. Okay, so this is a very auspicious and spectacular treasure. If you go to the church to see it, it's not really out on display because of its value. It's in the treasury, and you have to go down into a vault to see it. Okay, so today we're going to be working with a comparison. And as I said, comparisons is going to be question 1, first of all, but a comparison in art is often the two works are connected or related in some way, usually via a theme. So in other words, you're not going to look at your AP test and find that you have to compare the Parthenon and Starry Night, because there's no connection there. You're going to be definitely maybe jumping cultures or comparing across cultures, but the theme really could be the underlying connection. And so I'll ask you, well, what do you think the connection is on this comparison? Also, you know one of the works, the one on the left, and you probably know the one on the right if you studied, but if you don't, remember that sometimes you'll have to know based on an image. Sometimes you'll have to know based on the words with no image. So memorize that list. So today we'll be reviewing a couple of key works in their context, and then we'll be practicing a couple of comparisons. That is question 1 that you will be doing in a couple of weeks, okay? And then the last thing there, of course, is to back up what you say. In fact, I answered a question yesterday from Alison Napier's question, and I found myself, I'm really kind of not going to give myself a very good grade because I've been talking too generally. You have to shoot a bullseye arrow and go right in there and talk about a specific detail that illustrates what you are trying to say in your essay. So in other words, prove your case in court. Okay, so here is the reliquary figure from the Bieri. It's a Bieri figure. You can say reliquary figure or Bieri figure. It's from the Fang group of people in Cameroon, carved out of wood. And I always like to say when a work is typical of a type of work, for example, Koros statues we saw the other day, there's a lot of them. And there's a lot of these too. So you could see it's not the one thing like the golden stool or something. It's in a series of types of works. And you could see that all of the things have in common. So what do they have in common? What are the things that make these a group or a family? Okay, so what I'd like you to do now is to just either write down on a piece of paper or hold up your hand and count. What are some visual qualities? I'm just asking you to do a visual analysis. You don't have to know anything about context right now. Okay, go. Okay, very good. So hopefully you said some things perhaps involving elongation, a slight abstraction, a simplification, which we could call stylized, that they're certainly stylized. Certain features are out of proportion. It's not a proportional figure, such as the spear bearer. It's emphasizing large heads. And it also is emphasizing certain qualities that look as though it's an adult and certain qualities that look as though it's a child, okay? And then over on the left, you see the contextual photo, which I think is really amazing, that you can see that these figures are actually guardians of this bark box. And in the bark box, you have the relics, okay? So let's talk a little bit about the context and the function of this work. First of all, when you're asked to discuss context, you can just right off the bat go to time and place. The Cameroon, 19th century, 19th to 20th century, fairly contemporary. I always tell my students, you really do not have to memorize lots and lots of dates. I don't think it's really worth it. It's too difficult, but it's good to have a sense of dates or what came before other things on a timeline. And then in terms of the Fang people, now we're going deeper down into the context, that these people were migratory peoples. And that's very important. They moved around, and they took their relics with them because they were very essential. Okay, so here is the function right there on the top is the connection, the continuity with the past, with your ancestors. Okay, now that's really important for us today. You know, some of us have memories of people who are long departed, and the further back they go, of course, the more distant they get. But even you know, sometimes I think about, oh, I want to recall the energy and courage of my grandfather or something like that. So it's sort of like channeling these people that came before you. Okay, and then the figures themselves, as you can see there, um, they exemplify the tranquility, that sort of calmness, but at the same time vitality. They look like they're ready to spring. So it's a kind of Zen moment of having both of those at the same time, kind of like the shortstop as the pitch is being pitched, ready to go, but completely at ease at the same time. And then down at the bottom is another interesting contextual point that the works, the figures were protected. You know, not everyone in the tribe could see them. So there you could see not only women, but uninitiated boys. And sometimes these figures would be shown for the first time during a boy's initiation. Okay, and they could be used as almost like puppets, almost giving a voice to these powerful figures from the past. So they're carrying these along with them. And then there's some ceremonial things that happen with these works. And I really like these contextual photos. You could see they take the skulls out. Now remember, relics could be a lot of things. It could be bones, skulls, it could be hair, it could be ashes. It's basically the physical remains in any way of someone. Here they're cradling the relics and singing or chanting. So it's a moment of reverence and power. Okay. So given what I've just said to you, what would you say? How would you summarize it in just a couple of words? What the Bieri figure does? And could you say more than one thing? Okay. I'll give you 10 seconds to think about that. And then I'll show you what I came up with. Okay, here is my summary. These three. Okay, so now we're going to go back and connect these two works. I just mentioned that the head may have been repurposed from a Roman sculpture here, and I wanted to call out this word spolia because it's such a great word, and there's so many opportunities to see this in your image set, such as the early Roman basilica church, where they take the columns from a temple and they bring them in and they reuse them in the church. So this could be an example of spolia. And just like the African work was performed, and you know, this work in October every year goes on a float and is paraded in the town. So it's got that sense of performance. Now, my connecting theme that I came up with was reverence. Okay, how these works express reverence, which is an incredible version of respect. And what I think it's, you know, it'll usually tell you in question one, comparison question, what the theme is. But in this case, we're comparing based on the similar functions, but they both have reverence. Okay, so this is the kind of beginning of a comparison. I think if you can compare these four things, this is a good base. Do I have something to say about the four things? Number one is very easy, okay? Number two, you know that the left side is kind of an image of the saint himself, Saint Foy, and the right is a guardian figure, okay? And then the context we've just been talking about, so you know a little bit about that. And of course, the function on the left to preserve and honor the relics, and on the right to guard the relics. Okay, so here is my attempt to come up with an AP style question. And don't worry too much about it. I'm going to give it to you for homework. Okay, so if you want to try to do this, but you can see it's, I've bolded the verbs because I really like to do that when you're looking at a question with a lot of text, which these longer questions have. So you go select and identify, describe, explain, and explain. Okay, and then right down in the last two sections, you'll see the word evidence. Use evidence when you do this. So I'm gonna circle back around to this at the end of our session. Okay, there you go. Oh, there I put it. I changed the color. Doesn't that look great? All right. So for our second work today, we're going to talk about two works of pottery, ceramics, clay, however you want to call it. And I will have a lot to weigh in on this one because I am a potter. I make things on the potter's wheel. So this is an area that I love. And we're going to start, hopefully you remember this work from your Indigenous Americas set and know that it's a work by Maria Martinez. Okay, so there's a photo of Maria Martinez. And Maria Martinez went back and helped to kind of resurrect some of the techniques and designs of the old ways of ceramics, where people, tourists and whatnot, started collecting them for their beauty, whereas you know, they had kind of been, the Industrial Revolution kind of put them out of business for utilitarian work. So this new work, which is all through the 1900s, does not really involve a utilitarian ceramics. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about making the pot. This is not on a spinning potter's wheel, but it's coiled, and the coiling is on a little plate. The plate can spin or move a little bit if they have to do that. But you can see that they're using a pinch. They're attaching the coil of soft clay, and they're pinching it. They do mine this clay. It has to be mined and kind of ground up and mixed with water. It has to have the right amount of water with it. And they also grind, or they also mix in some of the ground up shards of old fired pots. So there's a whole art to making the clay to begin with. So there's a lot of work involved in this process. And hopefully some of you have tried making a pot in your high school career somewhere. If you haven't, I'd like you to try that in college. That would be a really fun thing for you to do. Now, this is the next stage. And in this stage is called a burnishing. So you have a piece of pottery, and it's in the leather hard stage, which means it feels about like a leather belt, and that you can, it has a little bit of pliability, but you can easily handle it. Now look at the difference between the one on the left and the one on the right. Because she's rubbed it so much, it's become shiny. And what that's doing is it's forcing all the rougher particles down into the skin of the pot. And you can see there that see that nice shine. It's really a beautiful piece. I was trying to, I have one of these little black pots somewhere, and I couldn't find it this morning. I wanted to hold it up for the camera. Maybe I can do that next time. But anyway, these are the kind of things that you can burnish with, pieces of wood or pieces of stone. I like the stone, which is on the right, like smooth creek stones. Sometimes for burnishing, you can use the back of a spoon. but don't use one of your mom's good spoons because it'll wear down the metal over time. Okay, and then the next stage will be painting on a slip, a different color slip, and a slip is liquid clay. It would be about the consistency of heavy cream. And she has a brush that's made from a cactus. I think it's a yucca cactus or something like that. And so they take these cactus and split the fibers to make a brush. Okay, so this is these patterns were not exact copies, but they were inspired by the old patterns of this pottery, of this area, from archaeological digs. So in other words, they dug up a lot of, old pots. They saw the patterns, and then Maria Martinez wanted to resurrect that tradition. And so that's where they got their ideas from, of their designs. So this is my favorite part. It deals with fire. I love anything with fire. It's one reason that drew me to ceramics. So they're stacking the pots on a pile of wood, basically, to begin the thing. And then they are insulating, which looks like old license plates. They just need a kind of moment of insulation. And then, yes, look carefully. Those are cow pies. So they use dung, dried cow dung, and they put them on. Cow dung is a which we know is like fertilizer. It's very flammable and is fuel. It is practiced as fuel. So then once they start to, there you can see the cow dung is lighting like coals. You can see the firing going. So if you ever had chemistry class, you remember oxidation and reduction. Okay, so in this particular kind of firing, you want reduction, which is where you starve the fire for oxygen, and the fire gets so hungry that it'll take oxygen from anywhere. So in the final result is that the ware or the pottery turns black. Okay, now if you have a oxidized spot, that means it'll come out a black pot with one little spot of red on it, and therefore it will go into your quality control pile and either be trashed or maybe sold as a second. Sometimes when you're in your pottery store, you can say, hey, I want to buy a second, and you get it at a better price. So here they are smothering the fire at the end to make sure it's reduction, pure reduction. And here on the left, they're digging out the finished work. You can see them, they're laying them out. I love this part. It's like an Easter egg hunt. You never know what's down there, what you're going to find. And then they get it with a stick because those pots are still too hot to touch. So if you can tell I'm becoming more enthused, it's because I make pots and it's something I love. On the right, you can see the finished work, very, very beautiful design. And here's a lot of the work. So these works gained popularity over time. They became very, very expensive. And so what I would like you to test yourself out sometime here is if you can say maybe 3 or 4 things about the process of ceramics that we just went through, and maybe what tools. For example, the part about burnishing. It's very important. And you notice the slip area that they paint on over the burnishing, it is not burnished. It's not shiny. So you have like a shiny black and a dull black together. Okay. When these pots became popular and people started buying them, oddly enough, there was a artistic movement going at that time in design called Art Deco. And people found that sometimes the designs echoed some of the Art Deco designs. Art Deco, the one design I would say you could look for in Art Deco is kind of stair-step patterns. But I won't say that the makers were exactly, being informed by Art Deco, more so informed by the ancient traditions of their own thing. But you know, it's a good question. How much freedom did they have to invent? When you sit down and you're going to paint works, you know, at work after work after work, artists like to start varying the thing. Okay. Now, also a very important part here is that Maria made the pots and Julian painted the pots. And oddly enough, that process was also common in ancient Greece, because we're gonna look at this work next to the ancient Greek pot that we have in our set. Okay. San Ildefonso is the town, and Tewa Puebloan is the group of people. Okay, so here, hopefully you remember this piece from the image set, although I'm showing you a different side of the piece on the left. But this is our comparison. And in this case, the comparison is media or materials and techniques, because these are two ceramic pieces. And there are some other ceramic pieces in the set. There's one from prehistoric, and there's a couple from areas that you perhaps did not get to, such as the Ai Weiwei sunflower seeds and the David vases. Okay, so let's see what we can, if we can review this crater a little bit. And it comes from classical Greece, and it was right in the early period of classical Greece, right after the liberation from the Persian threat. And it's called the Niobetes crater. We'll talk about the Niobe story in a moment. But a crater is a large open kind of bowl, and there's various versions of a crater. It can have handles or not, but it's a vessel that would be used to mix water and wine. So in Greece, evidently the wine was watered down a lot to be consumed, or even in some cases, water could be purified with the use of addition of some wine. But it's basically this large mixing bowl. Maybe you could think of it like a bowl. If you're going to make chocolate chip cookies, you make the dough in this. Okay. However, I often think about when I see Greek pottery, because there's so much of it, and so many museums have such big, nice collections of Greek pottery, that some of the works were actually, I think, used utilitarian, and some of the works were more ceremonial, or sort of like maybe if your mom has some really good china that only comes out on a very special day, maybe like that. And in some cases, Greek pots were used as funerary objects where they'd be buried in a tomb. So it's really there's a variety of things when you come to Greek pots. So you can see here also that this is the moment in Greek painting of pots when the figures changed from black to red. Before this, the figures were, the figure ground was reversed, and the figures were black, but they figured out some new techniques. The Greeks were also into the oxidation reduction knowledge, and when it came to firing, but they did reduction and then oxidation at the end. That's kind of technical. And you can see this work also has two registers, a band on the top and the bottom. I know we've seen registers in lots of works of art before. Okay, so let's go to all three sides of this, different views. Here we go. So over on the left, I just want to tell a little bit about it's the Niobetes crater, because of this is the story of Niobe. Niobe was a woman who bragged about her 14 children, 7 sons and 7 daughters. And she bragged in front of the gods, or to the gods, the goddess Leto, I believe, and then the gods don't like to be shown up by humans. So, you know, Niobe was showing a flaw or a sin, if you will, of hubris, of being too big, being conceited or too proud. And so they had Artemis go and kill the sons, and then Apollo went and killed the other ones. Anyway, she after she lost half of her children, she was mortified in grief, and then said, "Oh, but I still have these." And she continued to brag about her children, and all of her children were killed. So you could see the children are falling in the lower part of the pot up there in the upper left as the gods are shooting them. Now, the reason I really want to tell this story is that it's such an important idea in the fiber and the fabric of Greek consciousness and thought, is the idea of hubris. And hubris will definitely come back if you've had Greek tragedies in your English class, that it's something that's comes up a lot. It's to know your place. Okay, and then on the other sides of this pot, if you look on the right side there, you could see the figure of Heracles, a figure. And we know that that's Heracles. I don't think I have a detail of this shot, but he has a kind of a lion skin and a club that he has iconography that identifies him as Heracles or Hercules, you may say. And then these other warriors are people that are getting ready to go into battle. And then there's one theory that it's actually a painting of a statue of Heracles, and that the warriors are looking at the statue and getting ready to go to the Battle of Marathon, which we know was the deciding battle of the war with the Persians. Very important battle for the Greeks. Okay. So here are the two works, and I want you to be able to say something about form. On the left being a crater form, a kind of bowl for mixing water and wine. On the right, it's actually, this form does have a name. It's called an ala, a form. And in this case, we're past the point of these works being utilitarian, and they're just for looks, basically, collected by collectors, okay? And then on content, we talked about the story from Greek mythology that gives an important lesson about hubris and about showing too much hubris. I know we always said in my class that, you know, the seniors, I had all seniors, the kids in my class would always know not to brag about what college they were going to in front of other kids, right? That just doesn't make sense. Know when to keep your mouth shut is what that's about. On the right side, of course, it's an abstract design, but it's based on the archaeological excavations of an older and traditional Native American pottery. Okay. Context, left side, early classical Greece. And you could say, you know, it was a kind of work that was produced, a very common kind of work that our world is full of Greek pottery that we have left over. It's really the only example of Greek painting we have left, because Greek paintings that were on walls of houses, they're all gone. They're basically destroyed. So what we know about Greek painting is from pots. Okay, and of course, on the right, the context was this revival of a Native American craft that actually helped to save their pueblo and bring wealth to their pueblo. And remember the importance of money when it comes to art. And I said earlier in the series that, you follow the money, and you usually have an economic connection with the art. Okay, so I think we've kind of covered a nice, you have a nice platform, and we also covered some of the techniques that would be common in each. And I do think it's interesting that the both works, one person made the work and another person painted the work. So people did work in teams for these pieces. Okay, it's time to review a little homework. Yesterday we were looking at Machu Picchu. Okay, and we said that the visual characteristics. That's the both. Now, Allison Napier also looks like she bolded there, so I can hang out both the visual characteristics and the physical context of the city. So here's some of the things that I said. For me, one of the big characteristics was the stonework, the ashlar masonry. That's a hard one for me, but that's the way the stones are fit together with no mortar. And it's always very striking with Peruvian works to see the way those stones are fit together, and really the power of those stones, really amazing. The other feature of this that really stands out for me is the terracing. The work that it must have taken to do terracing up on that hill, and indeed the verticality of it. If you're looking up from below, you see vertical mountains, vertical structures. It really zooms up in this valley. Okay, so those are some of the visual qualities that stood out to me. And then of course the physical context of this city is that it's hidden, and it's you go down this long river valley, and it is a journey from Cusco, and we know that we have several images, things from Cusco, which was the capital, but to get here you go down, 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 maybe from about 11 or 12,000 feet down to about 8,000 feet altitude. There's still altitude, but you could tell this is a much greener, more verdant and wetter place than Cusco, which is so high in altitude. Okay, and so the let's see, the next one would be talking about the design of the city and how it relates to its physical and cultural context. So one of the things that I really brought out in looking at this work was the layout of Machu Picchu takes into account what we call architectonic, which means the architecture was related to the sky. The solstices, things line up. Now, if you take for an example the stone, the Intihuatana stone, which is the hitching post of the sun, there's a lot of sort of geometric alignment with solstices, equinoxes. We've seen this before. We've seen it in Egypt, in the Aztecs, the snake mound, the serpent mound from the other day. Okay, so these are one of the things that is very important in this. The other thing is the idea that this is an elite city. It's spaced out, and depending on who you are, the Inca ruler, his quarters are separated from the others, but the overall city was made for elites. I was saying earlier, it was kind of a bizarre combination of religious observations that with a luxury hotel, because it really is a place of incredible beauty, and I can only imagine that the elites must have enjoyed being up there. It's also an expression of imperial power, and in every way, the hierarchy is always reinforced of the power. So if you want to end this, the central ideas of Inca culture, which I would call the zeitgeist of Inca culture, is really the importance of the privilege and power, and as well the importance of the sun and the solstices and the knowledge of how that makes the culture continue through the growing of crops and the irrigation, the abilities to manipulate water and the sun and the crops. An empire depends on that, the ability to feed people. So this is quite a complex question. And hopefully you thought about it and said some of the same things that I talked about. So here's my practice for you. It's coming back from the first one, and I like you to don't take a picture of it just yet, because I'm going to put the other work. What I want to talk about is you have your 4 verbs there, but you can also see in blue, I put the scoring rubric in case you wondered, well, how will I be scored for each task that I have to do. Now, normally a question sort of starts off easy and ends up hard. So to really get the top score, it may not be that easy, but definitely to get something should be easy. And over on the right, you can see that this work is given as a picture, and then the student might have to identify it using 2 facts about the work. So that's a shown work. So the stated work down at the bottom, if they say the Sainte-Foy reliquary, that means that you would have to know that work from the words Sainte-Foy reliquary. You'd have to call up that image in your mind. So there's really 2 ways that you might be put on the spot for, do you know this? Do you know that the reliquary by the words Sainte-Foy reliquary, or do you know the Bieri figure by just seeing it? Can you identify these works? So here's the page I would like you to take a picture of with your camera phone right now, so that you can have some time to practice the writing this essay. And we'll have more of this to come. But I also want to say that this essay is a very nice comparison. It's very interesting, and these comparisons are very deep, okay? If you don't have time to write out the essay tonight, make a little chart in 5 minutes and see what you can do with this. It's a really good way to prepare for the AP test. Okay, this is John Gunnan in Newport Beach signing off. Until next time.